Today we are going to be discussing the topic of how witchcraft can help you to overcome abuse. Now, I want to start off this video with acknowledging the fact that witchcraft is heavily misunderstood. There is so much misinformation out there. A lot of people, unfortunately, have these ideas that witchcraft is something where people do it to just harm others. What witchcraft can do is that it can help you to move on with your life. It can help you process what you've been through. If you decide to work with certain spirits, certain deities, which of course, if that is something you are not comfortable with, you can choose to not do so. Not all witches work with spirits. However, it can be something that is extra helpful because working with certain archetypes can help to unlock certain parts of your brain. For example, if you're connecting with the goddess Bast, she is a motherly, protective energy, and that can help you to connect with your own motherly instincts, regardless of your gender, of course. Doing so can also help you to practice with working on boundaries, with being a lot more protective of who you open up to. It is also very important for me to acknowledge the fact that the path of an individual witch is very unique to that specific practitioner. A lot of people, when they think of witchcraft, they tend to attempt to apply it to a mainstream religion, or if they have heard certain superstitions, myths, fantasies, legends, etc. regarding witches, that's what they tend to think of. However, if you are not well read and well practiced when it comes to witchcraft, I encourage people to actually look at information from real practitioners. There's so much misinformation out there. There are so many people who do not understand it at all. They have so many different ideas of what it is versus what it actually is. As I stated previously, witchcraft is very individual. However, the overall mindset, depending on what culture, what type of tradition, what kind of witchcraft you are getting yourself involved with. There are some people who do practice witchcraft from a more religious standpoint. There are, of course, Wiccan witches. There are Christian witches, neo-pagan witches. There are hearth witches, hedge witches. There are even those who are eclectic, and for them, their practice shifts a lot, so they don't really fall under a specific category. However, the overall mindset of witchcraft is to learn, is to grow as an individual, and to have a spiritual practice. And also, when we're discussing the mindset of a witch, it is overall is seeing things from a more energetic perspective. There is a tendency to question things more and not to just take things at face value. When you really start to work on your intuition, on having a connection with yourself and with spirit, you really get to this point of having not just spiritual discernment, but practical discernment. And that is something that is so vital to overcoming and healing from abuse. Healing from abuse and overcoming abuse, just like the practice of being a witch, are similar in the sense that it is not something that happens in a year or less. It is a lifelong journey. You learn as you go. You read different books. You meditate on certain things. You may perform rituals or certain practices that help you to ground yourself, to have a connection to yourself, and even to rediscover yourself. I know I have seen different videos, I have had conversations with different people, and so on and so forth, even certain books where I have unfortunately seen this. And some people act as if when it comes to being a witch, that you are dismantling yourself and you have to completely change yourself in order to fit in this little box of, witches do this, witches don't do that, and so on and so forth. However, you come to a point where you realize that you are discovering your authentic self. You're discovering what you like, what you want in life, your shadow side, your light side, all of the wonderful things about yourself, some things that you have to work on. And when I say you have to work on certain aspects of yourself, that doesn't mean that you're quote unquote bad or that you are quote unquote not good enough. It just means that if you want the life that you envision for yourself, which most of us, we want a happy, healthy, peaceful life, then there are certain things that we have to see about ourselves. That there are certain things where if we do decide to work on ourselves and to heal, then it is something that is going to be beneficial for us. The beautiful thing about practicing witchcraft, which is something that I have discovered over the years, is that you really get to connect with your present moment. And not only that, but you are very much in tune with, yes, the present moment, but also what has happened to you in the past, and even with what you envision for your future. For so many average people, they sometimes connect too much to the past, or they connect too much to the future and not so much to the present moment. However, for a lot of witches, I have noticed that we have this beautiful balance to connect with the past, the present, and the future, especially for those of us who do practice divination. If you think of practicing with different types of runes, with tarot, oracle cards, scrying, etc. There are so many ways that we can and that we do connect to these different phases of life and even these different dimensions where we see things so differently and we learn so much. It changes our perspective and it makes us realize that yes, life is short and we want to live our lives in a way that is fulfilling for us. That doesn't mean that it is automatically something that is selfish, where I know maybe there might be someone listening and they may be thinking that, which sometimes that does stem from trauma. However, it happens in a way that is typically peaceful for all. There are a lot of people who falsely, in my opinion, accuse of witches of being out of touch with reality. And the fact that I have noticed within a lot of witchy spaces and communities, even books that I've read and my own practice, is that we tend to confront and come to terms with reality more so than the average person does. An example I want to give of this is, let's say that there's somebody who is in a relationship with somebody and it's an unhealthy relationship. However, they don't see it and they refuse to see it. When that happens, that opens you up to abuse. That opens you up to being taken advantage of, and it's not in sync with reality. because you're denying what is going on. I find with witches, we have a tendency to actually observe and to question things instead of just trying to turn a blind eye and act as if we aren't seeing what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. If there's anything else that any of you would like to share down below in the comments, or even if you have any questions, please let us all know down below. I appreciate you all being here, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody, and blessed be.